Good afternoon and welcome to the Penn Alumni Water Forum Speaker Spotlight. Thank you for participating in today's event. My name is Joanne Spigonardo, Senior Advisor at the Water Center at Penn. The Water Center at Penn is pleased to present two of our Penn MES alumni that will discuss their careers and how Penn's graduate program impacted their choice in working in the water and sustainability sectors internationally. I would like to give a brief introduction of Chantal Victoria Bright, who is a research professional with extensive experience in project management, rule of law, international affairs. She is also the author of the Janjay children's book series on water and environmental themes. Kambiri Cox is a climate resilient consultant and water resource engineer experienced in resource assessment and management and hydrogeochemical, climate, and geospatial data analysis. Our panel moderator is Emily Newton. She will give a more in-depth introduction of our speakers and will present many interesting questions. Emily is a senior manager of procurement at Bristol Myers Squibb. Formerly, she served as a procurement, marketing, and sustainability professional for several years at FMC. She also worked as a communications manager at the Wharton Initiative for Global Environmental Leadership. She has a long history and experience in business sustainability. Emily is a 2017 graduate of the MES program at the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in environmental management. Emily, I will pass the discussion on to you.
Thank you, Joanne. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And thank you for all the participants who are joining. It's my pleasure to give a little bit more introductions to Chantal and Kambiri. Chantal, as Joanne said, is a research professional with extensive experience in project management, rule of law, international affairs, and she is a grant and technical writer. She's an effective project designer for research. Her technical skills and knowledge on the water-gender peace nexus in fragile and conflict-affected situations in West Africa. Chantal has country experience in Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, United Kingdom, and the United States. She's also the author of the Janjay children's book series on environmental themes. This series has been translated into French by the US State Department, African Affairs Bureau Office on Public Diplomacy, Africa Regional Services Nouveaux Horizons, and the French editions of the book are marketed in French-speaking communities in Africa, Haiti, and they are distributed to American embassies to support education programs. As Joanne said, she's a fellow alumna of the MES degree in the MES program at the University of Pennsylvania. She got her degree in environmental management in 2012 and currently is seeking her PhD from the University of Manchester. I'd also like to welcome Kambiri Cox to this webinar. She is a climate resilience consultant and water resource engineer experienced in resource assessment and management. She grounded in hydrogeochemical, climate, and geospatial data analysis. Her work in the water sector traverses 9 years in 7 countries with a focus on water security for emerging economies in small island developing states and strengthening resilience for water and wastewater utilities globally. She's a 2013 graduate of the University of Pennsylvania with both a master's degree in geosciences, hydrogeology, and bachelor's degree in earth science and geology. Kambiri recently led the Climate Smart Utilities program as a manager at the International Water Association in London. She currently works full-time as a consultant at the Inter-American Development Bank. Thank you both so much for joining. We greatly appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak with you about your international careers and journeys in water and sustainability. And with that, what I would like to do is start asking questions. And Kambiri, I think I'd like to start with you. What motivated you to pursue a career in sustainability and, more importantly, the water sector? Oh, my apologies. If you'd like to give your overview and how you got there first, please go ahead.
Okay, sure, no problem.
I jumped ahead. I'm just too excited.
Yeah, I know. We're really excited to get to the discussion. I have a slide up, so we can probably switch to it and then we can come back to this one. Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
The one after.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you. It's so good to see everyone here today, virtually. It's good to be virtually back at Penn as well. It's been a while since I've been there. Yeah, so thank you, the Water Center, for inviting me to speak today and to share with you on my journey to an international career in water. It's always interesting hearing everyone's stories, and I hope my story today can inspire some of you. And, like you can ask me any questions if you have anything like that. Just to get started, so I just put this together today, yesterday, on laying the groundwater work, right? So as you can tell, that my background is in groundwater, like my specialty is groundwater sciences and focus on groundwater management and resource exploration. So as Emily and Joanne mentioned, I did both my degrees, my first degrees at the University of Pennsylvania, where I submatriculated into the master's program and graduated with both degrees in 2013. And some highlights of that time at Penn that laid the foundation for my later career was the summer field research program at Yellowstone. I think it's still being done, but it's the Yellowstone Bighorn Research Center, Assessment Center, yeah. So the YBRA Center, I did summer field work there in my junior year, and then I did the Penn and Tours France Study Abroad program. So this field experience combined with interdisciplinary learning, we're all fond of at Penn, as well as having that globally respected degree and that introduction to languages that really supported early career advancement for me. Yeah, so right after Penn, I was able to return home actually and work in the water sector. I was promoted pretty quickly to senior hydrological technician within 1.5 years of graduating because of that strong foundation in technical knowledge and being able to pull different skills together when it comes to getting groundwater resource extracted. So after working for a couple of years in the water utility, I decided to strengthen some skills in key areas, such as remote sensing, some water engineering skills, and a bit more focus on environmental engineering. So I did the European Union Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters Program in Portugal, Netherlands, and Germany for 2 years. And during that program, I did a couple internships, one in Benin with the UN International Groundwater Resource Assessment Center, IGRAC. Another one in the Netherlands with a boutique consulting company, and another internship in Dresden. So this picture here is actually in Benin, where I did the research internship looking at groundwater use and extraction in a peri-urban area and how the use by the local population was being impacted by some recent drilling there done in the underlying aquifer. Right, and then fast forward to the last couple of years, after graduating there, I had this entry into the European water sector by studying and doing internships in Europe. So I quickly moved into international NGO work with the International Water Association, where I got promoted to program manager within 2 years as well. And then I felt, with COVID, everything changes for everyone. So I felt a yearning to come back home to the Caribbean. So at the end of last year, I packed up everything and I returned to the Caribbean. And this year I started working with the Inter-American Development Bank. So working on blue technologies for the Caribbean, specifically with respect to waste management. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for my introduction.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for the in-depth background and how you got to where you are. Chantal, would you like to, give a nice overview as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Kambiri has an amazing background. I am going to start from my graduate experience at Penn. When I started at Penn, I really was looking to get into international, from the offset, looking to get into the international career. So my first semester, I ended up applying for a U.S. State Department Cultural Exchange Program, in which I spent time in Ghana and Liberia during the winter break. And I knew from there I was going to want to do a capstone project that was internationally based. And so Penn has a lot of opportunities, as we all know, but they held an international fair at the time during I believe my second year, and I attended it the first semester. And that's when I got the idea that I would incorporate a capstone project where I would travel abroad. And so one of the organizations that was featured at the fair, I was able to apply to that program and then spent my final semester in Ghana working on environmental sustainability and women in rural area microfinancing. And so I did that, and afterwards, after I graduated, I matriculated to London, UK. So I moved there initially, started to work in law, and my role there. So it's a bit of a, like, I have a bit of a diverse background in which how I got specifically into water. So at first, when I started off, when I moved to London, maybe just a few months after I graduated from Penn, I started working into law, and my role there was research and project management, in which I facilitated law firms and corporations on their Africa strategy. And so working a lot with African jurisdictions and dealing and managing a secondment program in which African lawyers came to London for a period of time to work on specific deals. And then after a while of that, I decided to go into academia and just to get more into research. And I first was at King's College London for a bit, working on an international health project. There was some aspects with environmental health as well. And then I left from there and went to Kingston University, which is another university in London, again, doing research and project management. In that time, I was thinking, I want to get back into specifically in water. And that's when I wrote my first book. And so it was sort of like a time, like a transitioning time. And I wrote my first book. We mentioned earlier, John Jay on Clean Water Clean Water Sanitation. And so once I did that, I also got the bug of like trying to go back to school and pursue my PhD. And currently, I'm actually at the Library of Congress as a research fellow, because my research looks at further connecting women, water, and peace in conflict-affected areas, specifically looking at Liberia. And so I'm here for this semester in Washington, D.C., where I'll be as a resident researcher, but also like using that towards my PhD. And so my PhD research is very much grounded in water research. And so I've always known that I wanted to get into research and specifically around water. If you can see here, like even in this earlier in this year, I attended the World Water Forum, actually alongside some MES current students. The MES programs runs a course in which students attend the World Water Forum. It happens every 3 years, I believe, and it's rotated in various countries. And this year it happens to be in Senegal. Even though I was coming as a University of Manchester PhD student, it was just really nice to be able to connect with current Penn students. So I tagged along and got to meet a lot of the current students in the program in Senegal earlier this year. The World Water Forum is actually the largest international conference specifically on water. So moving forward, as a part of my PhD, I'm going to be spending time in Liberia at ActionAid, and then I will go to Senegal as well, and specifically to do some research at some of their larger research centers. There's a lot of West African-based research done in Senegal, so I'll be spending my time there as well. So this is kind of my journey to specifically in water, but I've always been in international work, mainly research and project management. But now my research and my PhD is specifically looking at water security and conflict affected areas. Thank you.
Wow, that's so impressive. Your background and experience, I'm so excited to ask you more questions about it. So with that, we will go into the panel discussion. For all of our attendees, I just also wanted to mention, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, or for me to ask the panelists during the chat, if they have something that sparks your interest that you'd like me to follow up on, please put that question that you have in the chat box and I can ask it throughout. We will also leave time at the end, about 10-15 minutes to ask questions then as well. So you'll have that opportunity. And with that, I'd like to get started on some questions that I have for you both. So Kambiri, like I said, what motivated you to pursue your career in sustainability and more importantly, the water sector?
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for that cliffhanger earlier.
Sorry about that.
So you have everyone excited for our answers.
I've been excited for weeks for this, so.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, so actually it was for my career in water specifically, it was the course Environmental Science 200. I think it's Intro to Environmental Science, which motivated me to go that way. You know, since I was in Form 3, which I don't know what the equivalent is in the US system, but since you're like around 13 years old, I love geography and I love geology, and I always knew I wanted to be a geologist. And in Trinidad and Tobago, oil and gas is the main economy, right? So I actually planned to be a petroleum geoscientist. And I was on that track for all of high school, you know, like I chose Penn because of the strong geology program, but I was always focused on petroleum geoscience. And I decided to do environmental science 200. And I was like, oh, you know, this class is interesting. It's a huge class, a really popular lecturer. I think it was Professor Alan Plant at the time. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll check it out. And the way we spoke about water and environment, and at the time, Gasland, that movie was really popular with fracking industry and how it was affecting water supplies. I was like, oh my God, I can't be part of this, you know? So I decided to like on my own do a bit more research and like speaking with other professors at Penn and in other departments and finding out that okay, like the water crisis was already like a huge topic back then. And this is 2010, 2009 around there. And that just like motivated me, okay, like you definitely cannot do oil and gas anymore. And you seem to be really impassioned about water. So how about pursuing what you can do with water? So that's how I got into it, working alongside the oil industry at some point, but then like really trying to see, okay, instead of seeing them as the enemy, how can we work together to find like more sustainable solutions and work together towards climate resiliency without sacrificing our freshwater supplies?
That's very interesting how you got into this and through the oil and gas into water. So thank you
Don't
for that.
tell anyone.
Yeah, no. Well, you know, it's one of those, I was thinking as you were speaking, you know, when you were growing up, that's what you knew, that's what you were exposed to. But then through Penn, you were able to learn, you know, a different viewpoint and how there were other opportunities in this area. So that's great. So Chantal, you know, how did Penn prepare you for your current role and, you know, what you're working on now?
I think, I mean, the reason why I went to Penn, not just because of his reputation, of course, but like I like the interdisciplinary approach to education. It was just the ease of being able to take classes in various schools, regardless of what your concentration or major is situated in. So I think Penn I like the flexibility that the academic program provides, where you can sort of like curtail your own pathway. And that was really important to me at the time. I had opportunities at Penn to work at local schools. I'm a Philadelphia native, so I had the opportunity to work at my high school, which is no longer around, but it was across the street from Penn University City High School. And so I had an opportunity to go back to that school and work with the students there, do some ethnography. I also had, I took a class, Global Water Issues. At the time, it was taught by Stan Laskowski, and I was just hooked from there. He used to run the course where students would go abroad to the World Water Forum at the time. So yeah, so that was really kind of, I like the flexibility and the freedom at Penn. And I knew just having this various opportunities that I would be able to leverage that for an international career.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for those listening who might be at Penn in terms of things that they could get involved in? Just a follow-up question.
Yeah, I do actually. I think attend all of those like career fairs and different programming around campus, because not only do you get to meet other people, but you also learn about different things that are happening in Philadelphia and outside of Philadelphia. And I think that's really important to attend a lot of those different events, and join different groups as well.
I agree. You never know who you'll meet at those too. So great point.
I agree on that point, with learning what's around the campus, right? Learning what's in Philadelphia, like interacting with those schools. And even there was this ABCS course. I don't know if it's now offered. Academic, and Joanne may be able to help me here. It's like academic-based community service or something like
Yeah,
that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that was one great way to actually get into the schools, get into local communities, and you're still working on environmental projects, or water projects or geology projects. So yeah, I second Chantal's recommendation on that. Like, leave campus.
Yeah.
Because the real world is right there and we could already apply our skills walking 4 blocks away.
Yeah, that
Agreed.
course is really important, the field application project. So you got course credit, but you also did those wonderful community projects. So well done. And they're all over, not just in the School of Arts and Sciences, but all over. Every school of Penn has a project like that where you get course credit and you do community projects. So well done.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think also it changes your perspective too, quite a bit as you're working in your future career. Through that experience, where do you see future generations pursuing their career in the water sector?
Yeah, I can go first. I think most, like right now, we're still enjoying lots of freshwater resources. We can turn on our tap. We know the water is clean where it comes from. But for future generations, I think water reuse and resource recovery also, but water reuse mainly would be like the norm, So it would be a luxury only certain countries can afford when it comes to having freshwater sources from rivers, from taps, from groundwater. But a lot of countries would already be at the limit. So they would have to resort to having water reuse strategies. So right now, I think it'll be really good for students to get involved in finding out more about the water reuse market. What are the obstacles there? Public perception is a huge part of it, but also like the technology is lagging behind a bit, right? So what are the obstacles there? What new technologies they can go into? How can they overlap with the engineering school when it comes to designing, patenting new technologies, and just being curious about what you can do to add to that system, because it's going to come up on us really quickly. And we don't want to be at a point where we don't have enough water in certain countries and people have to make tough decisions, right? Or we want the water reuse technology to already be there. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be going into that area for sure.
I agree. And I think your point about awareness, public awareness is very important. I think I recently heard in the last couple of weeks that here in Philadelphia, because we had such a long period of time without rain, that they actually the public officials told us, try and conserve water as much as you can. And, that's not a common occurrence for people in Philadelphia. So it's like that type of thing, building awareness is very important as well.
I'm really surprised to hear that. I remember
Yeah.
when I lived at Penn, the water got shut off for some reason for maybe a few hours. And I was like, oh, we can just turn on the tanks. They're like, the what? But in the Caribbean, it's normal to have storage tanks, right? And I'm like, but where do they keep the storage tanks? They're like, yeah, we don't do that here. We get water through the pipe 24/7. So as you're saying that they're already trying to ration water with these, weather extremes and long summers,
Yeah.
that's definitely something that soon Philadelphia would have storage tanks.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be something that's like domestic storage tanks, I mean. And
Mhm.
It wouldn't be something that's such a startling possibility.
Right. And Chantal, you've been working quite a bit internationally. How has that, changed your perspective and the experience and where you'd like to go with your career?
The advantage of like working abroad, internationally, and especially in Europe, I have an opportunity to meet so many people from, especially in a place like London, and now I'm currently, I'm in DC, but I also live in Manchester in England. You get to meet so many people from around the world with various backgrounds and experiences. And because there's so many in Western Europe, and especially so many countries that are so close to each other, people easily move about and migrate. And so just learning about different systems and different cultures and experiences from like colleagues in like sort of like a very much international space. Yeah, I think has really been impactful for not only the opportunities that that I wasn't aware of prior, but also just like the possibilities that are out there, and access to having access has been like key.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And, Kambiri, I know that you've also worked internationally, and, was it difficult to adjust, in different working and living in different areas of the world?
Yeah, I think I didn't have the awkward period of adjustment because studying at Penn was already my abroad experience. As I mentioned, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and being at Penn, I went through all the awkward winter wear where, like you have to invest early on good on good jackets. But yeah, so that part wasn't a huge adjustment, but the languages, so in Portugal and Germany especially, people tend to speak the local language, which is expected, right? In the Netherlands, their English is better than mine. So that was a bit of adjustment being in Portugal and Germany and taking up those languages while I lived there. And then realizing for the job market in general, like for the technical roles, they really tend to attract more local people who are, well, Dutch people and German people and Portuguese people, but you wouldn't really have a lot of international engineers coming in, international geologists. So there was a language barrier where all the ads would be in a local language, right? And when they ask, okay, like, are you hiring international students, or is English accepted if you don't speak the local language? That was a bit of a hindrance because they're like, well, the team is speaking Dutch, so it's hard to adapt there. So actually, I think I got a bit more forced into the international NGO work and international organizations because of that language barrier. And if I was fluent in Dutch, for example, it might have been more natural for me to go to work with a Dutch water utility, because you have the technical knowledge, but it's just that when you go to these spaces, you have to kind of honor that's how the office culture is, and people speak in the language of the country. Right. So I think that was a bit of a career reshuffle there where I was like, okay, if I want to stay here, I either need to learn Dutch in 6 months or I need to look for international organizations that can comfortably speak English and can comfortably, they're open to having international people come in and diverse ideas being exchanged there.
Right. That makes sense. And 6 months, that's not a lot of time. So I'm sure that was a challenge, but a good experience at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't learn it, huh? I tried.
Oh, I thought you said you did. I apologize.
Oh, no. I tried to, but it didn't happen. But I did learn German. I hope I remember some of it, but I did learn German for 2 years, and I would just pretend to speak German in the Dutch markets and get away with it for a long time because the languages are really similar.
They're very similar,
but not the same. So I could not trick them for too long.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So Chantal, you have also spent, significant amount of time in Europe. How do you feel that they view water? Do they think about it differently? Do they value it differently than we do in the US?
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, Europe in general are very much more environmentally conscious than here in the US. They have a lot more aggressive policies and frameworks to protect the environment. They preserve things completely different. Now the UK is no longer a part of the EU, as we all know. But previously, a lot of the EU regulations were very aggressive on preserving the environment and water and things. I mean, I remember when I first moved to London, and we're out having conversations with some colleagues, and one of the things some of the Europeans would say was, when I go to the US, you guys have so much water in your toilet, like it's almost at the brim. And they're like, and when you flush the toilet, it's so much water going around in circle. Whereas it is true, like in Europe, it's just a little bit of water at the bottom of the toilet. So, just things like that. And also pointing out that like our toilet water is also drinkable, things like that, sort of differences. And, I started as well being a lot more, I thought I was environmentally conscious when I lived in the States, but actually living in Europe is a whole nother ball game. And so I've become much more conscious about the way in which I interact with the environment, and use and usefulness. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure that was a bit of an adjustment at first.
Yeah.
So we actually got a question in the chat. I think we might touch on this a little bit later. So I'll hold off that because you might have to repeat information. So we'll hold off on the question that we received, but I will address it. So let me get back to our questions that we had. So in terms of Penn, and this could be for both of you, feel free to comment. Do you have feedback on how Penn could do more to promote careers in the water sector for current students or future students?
I can go first. Yeah, I do have some suggestions. I think if to get name recognition is really important. So I think maybe reaching out to some of the alums that are abroad, making partnership agreements, used through alumni, like at alumni that are abroad, that are affiliated with specific corporations and company, hosting events, collaborating with some of the organizations abroad, I think would be really useful for like brand recognition. Also doing some sponsorships. That's my, yeah.
I'll probably add, I don't know if this is being done now, but when I was at Penn, I know like Drexel, they had this co-op program and students were able to go work with a company for 6 months and you can get credit for it and it can already feed into, your career. So of course, it's like a different academic model, but I think something like that, like when you're looking at these courses, having the opportunity to do internships in the summer, or even on the weekends, something part-time, and something that can already lay the foundation where you have work experience when you leave college, So those research programs as well, like there was this a summer research program where people get to go abroad in different countries or even in the US to different states, and they do research with professors or with companies. And that, like one of my friends who did it in Malawi, her career just took off into the global health space when she left because she did the perm summer research her freshman year after summer. And then she did another, because she had a research experience, she did another internship the next summer in research in Ghana. So by the time she had graduated, she had this incredible resume, behind her. She had strong recommendations. And she herself also knew exactly where she wanted to work when it came to health. She was pre-med during college, but by the time she left, she knew she wanted to go about health. So she did a master's in public health and she did more programs targeted towards working in Africa. So I think Penn already does an amazing job with the research opportunities. It may be a case of letting students know more about it and having more alumni or current seniors come and share that experience with freshmen, because I feel like at some point you feel like it's a little too late, and you're trying to get caught up with schoolwork and your senior thesis and all these things. But I think like introducing freshmen to those opportunities really early on by having those real examples in front of them, that would definitely go a long way towards that. And then my second point would be having alumni engage more on the social media platforms we have for like EES, for example. One of my friends, Octavia, like she posts all the time jobs there. jobs in sustainability, jobs in corporate sustainability, governance, all these things. And I think I used to at one point too, but I think having more alumni come back and say, hey, this is something my company, I know the person working there, drop me a line if you're interested or you have questions. I think encouraging that atmosphere is really good. And it's up to us as alumni to also like participate and actively contribute there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In conversations or opportunities, or even their advice, sharing their advice and their experiences, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so we did it. I think this is a good question, speaking of that. So where would you say the most emerging careers are within the water sector?
I would say definitely innovations, like innovative technology. We're realizing that, like I mentioned, the water reuse earlier, but also we're going into areas where we realize the technologies we have right now, when we compare to the oil sector, our cousins over there, when we compare to the oil sector, or even just like food, or like innovations in irrigation for food, we realize that there is a lot of, like, the market is wide open. So I think like students could definitely try to apply that interdisciplinary approach and see, okay, not just in water coming out of the taps, but like the water footprint for clothing. We're looking at food and agricultural practices, but trying to see where they can make that change, because we're all aware of the issues in water. We all study the same subjects, and I feel like we all know, so we should stop talking to each other about it, but reach out outside that circle and bringing other people into the conversation. As Chantal mentioned, in Europe, like having that environmental conscious there, that's such an important point, because some of the best discussions I've had on water and climate are with people who do not work in the sector, who never studied in the sector, who are musicians, artists, they're mathematicians. They work in areas completely outside water, but they have an opinion and they have respect for water. They have respect for climate. They know what's going on. They're already like voting based on climate policies, So that appreciation for water and the environment and what's happening to our climate, that's already a long way in advance in Europe. The US is a long way ahead of the Caribbean. So I'm starting back at zero here, but like working with the public to make sure that it's not just our problem and we're going to solve it, but everyone can collaborate on this.
I completely agree. And Chantal, feel free to add your viewpoint as well.
Not much to add, but I completely agree. People are much more environmentally conscious, and they're not even they're very conscious about the way in which they interact and with the environment. So 100% agree.
I agree. And Kambiri, you were touched on, you mentioned, food systems. We actually did get a question submitted through the chat, which was, can you speak to any experience you've had with the interrelationships between water and food systems on a global scale? What are our most pressing challenges there?
Yeah, I can touch briefly on this, but I think I saw in Chantal's bio, working with the microfinancing for women in Ghana.
That's right,
so,
yes.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that, but I'm not avoiding the question, I promise, but I'm really curious about that, because I did some research really briefly when I did an internship with Acacia Water in the Netherlands, in Gouda, or Gouda, as non-Dutch people say. When I did that internship there, we worked on getting a the socio-technical understanding of northern Burkina Faso, and trying to figure out what water was available there for farmers, because the whole point of the project was supporting small enterprises that were targeted towards farming and having these crops for selling, not just for feeding locals, but for selling and exporting throughout the country, well, outside the country as well, to neighboring countries in West Africa. So the whole point of the project was food security, and what we were looking at was like what water sources we can work on. And I think the relationship between water and food is such a delicate relationship that we have, because that water food next to us, we have to like work on a balance where we're saying, okay, we're providing you with fresh water supplies, but we also don't want you to take too much, right? And we need to manage the users of fresh water so that we don't have agricultural users and industrial users, taking away so much from people who just need a glass of water to drink. And when we're looking at how we're using this water for agriculture, how can we make it more efficient? And how can we change our diet so that we're not having this intensive use of water going towards, like huge farms? And, how can we find a ways to make our diet adaptive to using less water in agriculture? I think that's something that's happening globally. I would like to hope that the needle is moving a bit more to people being a bit more conscious on this. Like I think Kevin Hart has a fast food chain now with plant-based hamburgers. But like we're seeing more and more interest in having a plant-based diet. And I myself am trying to adapt my diet to have more plant-based meals and days with just plant-based diets. So I think that the needle is shifting slowly. We shouldn't force people to move, but we should be educating more and more people on this and educating our farmers on this, and to make sure that we're not that we're looking at other options for that fresh water, where it's water reuse for certain crops, like something like that, and the feed that we're giving to animals, that we're trying to see, okay, where we're getting that feed from, how water intensive is that process as well. Yeah, so it's definitely moving there. But I'll shoot to Chantal really quickly because I want
Yeah,
to find
Chantal,
out
feel.
about Ghana.
I could speak a little bit about that. When I was at Penn and I did my capstone project in Ghana around microfinancing, a lot of the loans were given to women specifically because a lot of women in sub-Saharan Africa or many countries around the world, but specifically I'm talking about Africa, their loans go to their businesses, and their businesses is very much in the agricultural sector. And so a lot of them are farmers. And so the women are very much involved in managing water for just not for like as a commodity, but also for their livelihood, but also for the household. So we were trying to, at the time when I was an intern at this microfinancing institution, we're trying to implement a way in which where we can do dual contracts where the women could be also engage with positively with the environment, either using less resources that will affect or the environment, or also giving back in a way where they were contributing to maybe perhaps like less, burning trash or producing products that were harmful to the environment and things of that nature. So yeah, it was very much grounded in like women's use of water management and with the agriculture. Because again, I think I don't want to misquote the percent of women in agriculture in Africa, but like generally in a lot of countries, it ranged from anywhere from 40 to 60% women farmers. So,
Right, and that's a large portion of that, population that excuse me, that you can target and educate and help make a difference. So that makes sense, and that's really fascinating. Really appreciate you sharing your experience with this. So I guess where do you both see yourself in 5 years? Where would you like to be? Obviously, I know life changes and things, as you learn more and go through life, but where do you see yourself?
Definitely in the Caribbean, first of all.
I don't blame you.
I always joke with a friend, she asked someone this, and he was like, oh, probably Barbados. And she meant like career-wise, where he saw himself. But actually, probably Barbados or Trinidad. But I definitely want to be working on water solutions, climate resilient solutions in the Caribbean, you know? So working in Europe and studying in the US, like there was this interest, and you're exposed to so many things happening, so many technologies, you're amazed at all that's happening, and then you come back home and it's like, oh, okay, we need to catch up a little bit. So I think like that's where I want to be. I want to like take that knowledge, work with some of the emerging researchers here, like some of the cool technologies are coming out of the Caribbean universities, particularly University of the West Indies, and some of it is coming out of the oil and gas industry, the petrochemical industry, because even they're making a shift to being more green, more sustainable, and finding water solutions because they need water, right? So I think I definitely want to work on that in the Caribbean, you know, building climate resilience for small island developing states in the Caribbean region. That's where I want to be.
Well, for me, I think I kind of want to I see myself in the next 5 years. First of all, have completed my PhD, hopefully in the next 5 years. And then once I'm on the other side of things, I would like to have like a hybrid career where I lecture part-time at a university, but also I want to very much be in research, but I want to do applied research. So what I mean by that is like the research that's being done in think tanks and in various organizations, use that research to actually implement different practical things on the ground, like either through practices like influencing policy or frameworks or developing that kind of thing. Because one of my pet peeves within academia is that we're just talking amongst ourselves and everyone's smart and everyone's doing research, but we're the only ones reading the papers. And so maybe perhaps using some of that knowledge and like working it in real life where it's like an impact on people's lives. So yeah, my regionally, I'm interested in West Africa, obviously, but also I'm also American, so I'm also interested in like environmental justice things, the things that are happening now in the States, in certain areas, like obviously right now in the news is Jackson, Mississippi,
Yeah.
things like that. Those I'm inspired by those sort of stories and how my research can be used to help advance those communities. Yeah, so that's kind of where I see myself.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I think that's a great point about, using your research to have, apply it in different communities and actually have that impact on a community level as well. Do you foresee yourself writing any more children's books in your series?
Yeah, I mean, I've pitched it in a way where I'm going to write the third part to my children's book as a part of my PhD, but the way things are going now with the PhD, I'm not sure, but I do have plans. I foresee John Jay's series to be like a 5-part. So yeah, I'm hoping certainly sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great because we got a comment. Excited to have met Chantal at the World Water Forum and now bringing her books to the Philadelphia School District's classrooms. That was from Ellen Schutz. So I think you have an audience that is hoping that you can do that.
I have to say, the first time I heard about Chantal's books, I was like, you can do that? Like, just, because like she said, you're doing all these academic papers and you're writing for the same audience. I'm like, oh, okay, like writing a children's book and you're having these strong principles behind it. But it's so beautifully illustrated. It's so interesting. It's an interesting storyline that they don't realize that, like they're receiving all this like foundational knowledge that would
Yeah.
shape their decisions later on, how they use water now and how they approach water and how they value water later in life. So I must say, Chantal, like I'm so proud of you for this. Like it's so inspiring.
Thank
And
you.
you've like set a bug on me and I'm just like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this in the future sometime.
You can definitely do it. I mean, I think it's really important, like to also like use some of your creative background. It doesn't even have to be like in writing in a book or something, but you can also film and podcast. There's so many other creative outlets that I think that we can use our knowledge and research to put out in the world,
And that's the thing, like you're putting out messages through different channels, your different audiences are receiving it. So I think that's also something to go back to that question, like what Penn can do more, to
Mhm.
get people in the
Yeah.
water sector, and just in the environmental sector. Like going into having that film class. I did a film class for fun because I had extra credits. I think it was history of cinema or something. It was amazing. Didn't score so well in the grades, but the course was fantastic. And having that, like for you to just sit down and be like, okay, at Penn, I can do so many things. I have so many free credits. I can go this way, that way, that way. But having something that's actually shaped around, that communication on water and climate. And how can we go through different channels, whether it's writing books, the podcast, Chantal mentioned all these things. because sometimes like freshman and sophomore, you're a little hand holding when it comes to that. And I think like, that would definitely go a long way.
Yeah,
I
for
agree.
sure.
I agree. And everyone learns in different ways. So different mediums, you can reach different people. So it's a great point. And I also wanted to mention in the chat, there is a link for more information on Chantal's series, if you'd like to click that and find out more information. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to
Oh,
say, Emily, how about you? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
that's a very good question. So right now, right now I'm working in procurement, and I think there's more awareness amongst procurement professionals about the difference that procurement can make in sourcing, responsible sourcing. And I am currently, it's not my primary role, but I'm the commercial sustainability lead. So basically I work with all of my procurement colleagues in commercial to start and continue integrating sustainability within our strategies in sourcing, which I think is very important because, as we all know, it's, we have impact on direct and what we buy and what are our suppliers doing? Do we have risks in our supply chain? I think these are big questions that I'd like to continue working on in 5 years, because I find the most interesting part of my job, and helping other procurement professionals become more aware of what is material to them.
That's fantastic, yeah.
And I just had one more question, and then we can open it to the audience. What is the number one thing we can do to preserve water? And you both can answer in any order.
Oh.
I didn't mean to stump you.
No. Like, yeah, I was thinking about this before, but I forgot where I went to this. Chantal, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I don't know much about this, but I've been learning about it from my other colleagues, is digital water. And it's basically this idea of like using real-time data to provide to users to see how they can apply and be more conscious about the way that they use water. And I think it's really interesting. A friend of mine is doing his PhD on it, and it's of the future, using data, again, back to what I was saying before about like applied research, using this sort of research to to be used in a more practical way for everyday use, and not just in the academic bubble. So yeah, I think using that sort of data and informing people, it gives people information. I think the problem is a lot of times that people are just unaware and don't and haven't had access to that sort of information. But if you present folks with the information, then they can make conscious decisions. Yeah, so
Agreed.
that's
Yeah. I think that digital water angle is definitely something that's, like before I started working at IDB, I was actually approached to lead communication at a digital water startup in Spain. And I said, I don't want to go back to Europe. But like seeing that space and how it's grown so much in the last couple of years, especially like with my previous water utility in Trinidad, when they're looking at their district metered areas and where they have leak management and pressure management and all these things going on, having that system digitized is improving management of leaks and our infrastructure. And therefore we're losing less water, right? We're losing less water to just leaks and runoffs and all those things. So we're able to have more water coming, like better service delivery. So yeah, that's definitely something that would go, like the conservation angle from the utility side, especially, is where digital water be fantastic there. What I would say, going back to just understanding the water and where it comes from and where it goes, that's something that we still have a long way to go, especially with groundwater. This year for the World Water Day, the theme was groundwater, making the invisible visible. And that's one thing that I was really surprised. Like when I've been all over the world, people are like, oh, groundwater. And you explain it to them and they're like, there's still like, there's a bit of like, it sounds familiar, but when I think of water, it just comes from the rivers and the rain, and groundwater is something like it ends there. I'm like, no, actually, like this country uses 60% groundwater, or whatever it is. And I always like to shock them with statistics because they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And when you see like more rural communities working with wells, for them, groundwater is like a huge problem every day, a huge challenge in managing that resource. So there is that disconnect. And I wish people, especially people in urban areas, had a better appreciation for the different water sources and how much work it takes to get water coming in our pipelines 24/7, where we can enjoy that luxury. I think if people had a better understanding of that, then they would know, okay, that I need to do my part at the tap in the house to conserve there.
We got one question from a participant. As someone in the MES program looking back, what on-campus or off-campus opportunities did you find the most valuable in your current position?
I would say it was the community-based program where you have the opportunity to work with local schools and local organizations. I think that was the most impactful for me because it exposed me to what's happening in the communities and how my work at Penn or my like coursework and research at Penn could be used to like have an impact. So I think that yeah, and probably also going abroad to Ghana as well, and that was facilitated through Penn. So the international program, so an international exchange.
That's great. Kambiri, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, well, I did MSAG, so I kind of,
Oh.
yeah, I missed the rest of the question. I was like, oh, that's not me.
Oh, that's not.
But, opportunities most valuable to current position. Yeah, the Penn Study Abroad program, that was pretty cool when it came to living in a country and speaking a foreign language every day and learning to adapt and look at how different cultures value water. That was, I think for me being from the Caribbean, we're so tied to American culture that it wasn't so much of a shock being in the US. But being in the US and then having an opportunity to go to France for the summer and live with a French family, and basically just see how things are done there and how they value water there. That was a bit of a surprise to me. So that kind of made me open to the idea that, okay, there are different ways of thinking around water, and not necessarily better or worse, but just different ways of thinking. And having that diverse approach when it comes to valuing water and managing water, I think was something that was really valuable long-term in my career. So the Penn Study Abroad program and the ABCS program I mentioned, and I guess Environmental Science 200, right? So coming right at the time of Gasland. So having that early career pivot right then, but having like professors who are passionate and made coursework interesting, like wetlands with Sally Willig had me so sure I would work in wetlands. I was 100% sure that I'm going to be like a wetland hydrologist. It didn't work out, but it was still one of the most valuable courses I ever took. And being outside with nature and seeing that textbook come to life, like I realized that I wanted to be outside and working in the field and really working with communities to make their livelihoods better. So yeah, definitely, if you have the chance, if that's still being offered, do like these field courses, the Yellowstone one, working with Sally with wetlands, and then do something that's outside the box for you. If you're so sure already where you want to work in environments and geology, do something that doesn't seem like, it's on your career path, because it just may shake up things a bit. It may reinforce where you want to be, or it may cause you to go another way.
I agree. That's great advice. So Brianna Gray, she's raising her hand. We have a little bit of time left if we have a quick question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was actually typing my question now, but I realized it's like a
Oh.
paragraph. So I can actually just say it. So I recently was listening to NPR and I learned that like celebrities out West, like Kim Kardashian, Kevin Hart, Sylvester Stallone, have exceeded their water allowance by like 150%. And it sort of brought me to this thought that there's like a pay to play system in the water discussions. And so, you know, if you have certain abilities or levels of money, you're able to insert opportunities there that may not be accessible to others who don't have that same sort of luxury. And so I'm thinking about how we move beyond this mentality where, oh, I'm just going to get taxed for using more water, and I'll just pay the tax, as a and shifting that mentality to something where it's, you know, we care because this is something that we want others to have access to. We care because this is something that should be a human right. And so we're not going to exceed those sort of limits that the government is placing on us because we care. I don't know if that's like a philosophical question or if that's something that we can, you know, shift minds and hearts through. But I know it's probably a minor thing, but
That's a good question.
You know, I'm just thinking through things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
That's really fascinating. I had no idea about this water allowance in the West, even that and the domestic stage, you know, where individual persons were. So Brianna, if you have that link, that'll be cool if you could share it in the
Oh,
chat,
sure.
but I'll look it up as well. But I think really quickly on that would be when we look at huge water users in industry, when we look at companies, right? And it's the same thing there where they're like, okay, I'll just pay the taxes, the stormwater credit, whatever, I'll just pay it, you know. But then we see that our generation, especially, or the generation younger than me, they're really going after these companies, naming, shaming, and affecting their public brand. And a lot of companies, and as you mentioned, celebrities, a lot of celebrities and influencers, that for them, the brand is very important, you know. So when it comes to losing sponsorships, when it comes to people really like going after where they're getting their money, so they can say, okay, maybe I can make these small changes so that I can just get them off my back. You know, it may seem like a really low hanging fruit when it comes to that approach, but like we have so much power as consumers, not just for industries, but also like social media consumers and consumers of pop culture. And we're only realizing it mostly in the last 5-10 years. And when we like recently we had celebrities who had huge carbon footprints with their travel as well. And the same thing happened, right? So I think going that approach as consumers, that's definitely something that we can try to go after them in that sense, like getting their fan base to motivate them to change, because we're not interested in buying what you're selling otherwise.
Agreed.
Thank you. Also, the chat is disabled. I was going to link it in the chat, but I couldn't because I think it says the host disabled the chat.
Oh, Emma, are you able to?
I can put it in the Q&A.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I can share it with them. So I was getting the Q&A directly. So
And
I know oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you to close because we're running out of time, but if you have any other remarks, please feel free.
Okay, that's what I was going to say too, Joanne, that we should probably close it out.
Oh no, that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Well, wonderful discussion, Kambiri and Chantal and Emily. Thank you for your time and commitment to Penn, and mostly thank you for your service that you're giving to the water sector. It's really important work that you're doing, and we're really appreciative of that. Your remarks and experience in working internationally on water has been really interesting to all of us today, and we hope to stay in touch with you. And I'm looking forward to the next book, Chantal, and I'm looking forward to meeting you both in person, because the Water Center at Penn is actually having careers in the water sector event on October the 28th. The invitation is up online, but everyone that participated today will be getting a personal invitation. It's going to be October the 28th at the Perry World House at 10:45 a.m. We have companies there that will be our speakers. We have WSCC Water, we have Bentley Systems, we have Among Advisors, we have Solenis, We have a lot of alumni that are coming. So I hope you do attend. And I hope everyone here will stay in touch with the Water Center of Penn, how we can make things better for you. And think about the question, what is the #1 thing you can do to preserve water? Maybe if we think about that question today and maybe do it today and think about it tomorrow, maybe we can make a small impact. But thank you so much, Emily. Thank you, Chantal. Thank you, Kambiri. You're really doing important work and we're really appreciative. Thank you again. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you,
you all.
everyone.